I was 13 the summer my mother, Veronica, pushed me from a small boat into the ocean off the coast of Miami. The sky over America was a clean blue, bright as a new plate, and the water looked friendly until it took me in like a mouth. I did not see her face when her hands shoved my shoulders. I saw only the white rail, the flash of her ring, and then the drop. The shock of the water ripped the air from my chest. The noise of the boat faded, and the world went quiet and green. My father, Robert, had died a month before, and his voice came to me as if from the bottom of a well. "Breathe slow, kiddo." I could not breathe at all. Salt burned my throat. I kicked without aim. Every move felt heavy, like I was pushing a car uphill. Sunlight broke into coins above me, and I reached for it, but the ocean kept pulling me down. I tasted metal and fear. Somewhere in that thick silence, a shape slid past my arm, gold and green, fast as a thrown knife. A dolphin fish glowed in the water, a living light. It circled and flicked its tail as if to say, "Here." I followed because not following felt like dying. It swam just ahead of me, and I kicked after it, clumsy and scared, my heart beating like a drum in a marching band. The fish rose toward the bright roof of the sea. I rose too, and my face broke the surface with a hard gasp. The air scraped my lungs, but it was sweet. Waves slapped my ears. The fish arced again, and I fixed my eyes on the glitter of its back. I tried to think of simple things. Move arms, kick legs, count to 10, count to 10 again. I thought of my father's old rule for panic. Add numbers until you feel silly. So I whispered, 1 + 1 is 2, + 1 is 3, + 1 is 4, and kept going until the numbers felt like company. The fish held a steady line, not too fast, not too slow, keeping me in the slip of its path. My limbs burned. The water tugged me sideways, then forward, as if a soft current had found me and made up its mind. Bits of seaweed brushed my ankles. The water grew less deep, then less again. I saw pale sand under me, first as a blur, then as a floor I could touch. When my toes scraped it, I cried out from shock and joy. A wave rose behind me and lifted my whole body like a palm. It tossed me forward, and I sprawled in the foam, coughing hard, spitting salt. The fish flicked once more in the face of a wave and vanished into the deeper blue, as if it had only been an idea the ocean loaned me for a minute. I lay on the wet edge of America and pressed my cheek to the sand. I was alive. My arms shook so badly, I could not push up at first. I gave myself a count of 20 and tried again. I sat up and took stock of the way my father taught me. Name 3 true things, he used to say when storms hit. Start there. 1. I was on shore. The beach looked like the one south of Miami, wide and flat, with gulls yelling at the world. 2. My body worked. Everything hurt, but my fingers opened and closed, my knees bent, my shoulder burned, and it was still mine. 3. I had to go home. Home was our house on Maple Street, the one with the blue door and the lime tree that dropped fruit on the walk. My father had loved that house more than any car or suit or watch. He said it was our anchor. He had a simple will drawn by James Carter, a lawyer out of New York City, and everyone knew the estate was worth more than $2 million even before the latest appraisal. I knew my mother wanted that money, without me in the way. Music floated down the coast, thin and tinny, like a party far off. I stood and swayed, and then found my balance. My dress clung to me and leaked a trail behind me. My hair stuck to my neck in a heavy rope. I thought of Aunt Margaret, who made lists for every crisis, and of our neighbor Ben Walker, who checked on us after the funeral and brought a casserole thick with noodles. I thought of how my mother smiled at them both, wide, bright, and empty, and how she had ordered cases of champagne for a thank you gathering set for tonight. She had told me to spend the night at Lily's house, to rest, but her voice had that sugar note she used when she wanted me small and out of the way. Now the sugar had washed off, and there was only the hard taste of truth. The boardwalk began a few blocks up from where I crawled out. I walked it barefoot, leaving wet half-moons. A couple holding hands stared at me, then looked away like people do when trouble might cost them time. A woman jogging slowed and said, "Are you okay?" I said, "I need to get home." My voice sounded older than 13. She pointed me toward a path that cut inland, and I thanked her. Every step sent a new pain through my legs, but pain meant I was still in the game. I kept moving. I passed a bait shop with a hand-painted sign and a diner with a chalkboard price for pancakes, $5.99. The world was the same as it had been an hour ago, and also not the same at all. The sun had slipped lower by the time I reached our street. The lime tree out front looked like a friend waving both arms. The house sat with its simple face and blue door, the porch rail neat, the steps worn in the middle. Through the windows, I could see light and movement. Music thumped low, the bass like a second heart under the floor. Cars lined the curb, a silver sedan I knew, a black rental with a sticker still on the plate, a bright red coupe that belonged to Ben. Balloons bobbed on the mailbox. This was the thank you gathering. All right. The banner across the living room would say something soft I knew, new beginnings, or a fresh start, the way new paint hides mold for a few weeks before the dark comes through. I paused at the foot of the steps and put my hand on the rail. My palm left a wet print. I looked down at myself. Sand smeared my knees. My dress was torn at the hem. I had no shoes, no phone, no plan but the plain one. Walk in and tell the truth. I thought of my father's map of America that hung in our hallway, with little pins where he had traveled for work: New York, Chicago, Dallas, Denver. He had promised to take me to see the Liberty Bell one day and to stand with me at the edge of the Pacific and clap when the sun went down. Those trips were on hold now, but the map was still there and the house was still mine to fight for. I climbed the steps. The bass shook the glass in the door. Voices swelled and fell, a tide of laughter and clinking and words I could not catch. I wrapped my fingers around the knob. It was warm from the night air. In my head, I counted again. 1 + 1 is 2. I took a breath that tasted like limes and salt and fear. Then I turned the knob and pushed the blue door open. The music in our living room was loud enough to rattle the frames on the blue walls, but when I stepped through the door, the sound seemed to fold in on itself and go thin. Balloons drifted under the ceiling fan. Candles burned on the piano where Aunt Margaret stood, a careful smile fixed to her face, as if pain could be hidden with good manners. A long table ran along the window with bowls of shrimp and little signs that said, "Thank you," as if gratitude could be served with toothpicks. In the middle of that table lay a fake check the size of a poster. It was made out to Veronica Hale, executor, for $1,500,000. The zeros looked like small mouths. I felt my own mouth go dry. My wet dress dripped on the rug my father loved. A few guests turned and stared. Some blinked, as if trying to wake from a bright dream. When my mother saw me, her face went pale, so pale I could see the blue lines at her temples. The glass in her hand shook once and stilled. The room did not breathe. Only the bass from the kitchen spoke, a faint thud, like a distant heart. "Hi, Mom," I said, because anything more felt like a lie I did not want. My voice came out calm, not brave, just steady like a pencil line. Aunt Margaret's hand flew to her mouth, and then she said my name as if it had 40 letters. Someone else whispered, "She's alive," and the whisper ran around the room like a small wind. My mother tried to smile, but could not finish the shape of it. "Sweetheart," she said, but the word broke in the middle. Her eyes slid down my arms to the sand on my knees, to my bare feet, to the slick hem that clung to my legs. For a long breath we looked at each other, and I saw a fast math in her eyes. The house on Maple Street, the accounts with my father's name, the trust with rules she could not bend if I was here. I also saw fear, clean and cold. It felt like the first true thing we had shared in weeks. James Carter, the lawyer from New York City, was near the window with a drink he had not touched. He set it down so gently that the glass did not make a sound. "Do you need a doctor?" he asked me. Ben Walker slipped out of the cluster by the buffet and took off his jacket without a word. He put it over my shoulders. It was warm and smelled like soap and cut grass, and the weight of it stilled the shaking in my arms. "I need water and a phone," I said. I took the glass Aunt Margaret held out. My hands were steady now. I drank and then dialed 911. It felt simple. When the operator said her name, I said mine and I said where I was, and I told her that my mother had pushed me off a boat near Miami. I said I had swum to shore and walked home. The room tilted then, a slow turn of tide, and all the smiles slipped as if they had been glued on. The police came fast. Officer Daniel Reed stepped in with a notebook and the kind of quiet that made noise move out of the way. He had neat hair and calm eyes and a voice you could lean on. He asked my name and my age. He saw the sand still stuck to my calves. He asked if I was hurt. I said I was not sure, but I could stand. He nodded and asked me to tell him, from the start, what had happened. I told him about the push and the drop and the green of the water and the dolphin fish that shone like a coin and led me toward land. I did not dress the story up. I told it plain. He wrote as I spoke and did not look away. When I finished, my mother laughed once, a thin, strange sound. She's lying, she said. She is dramatic. She jumped to get attention. Her smile tried to return and failed. Officer Reed looked at her and then back at me. He asked my mother where the boat was, who rented it, and who had been with us. My mother said we had gone out to spread my father's ashes, and I had gotten upset. She likes stories, she added, and I watched the word stories fall between us like a cracked plate. Everyone, please stay in the house, Officer Reed said, his voice still even. This won't take long. He had another officer step to the door. He asked to see the party list and the rental receipt if there was one. James Carter raised his hand slightly, as if in court. I can help gather documents, he said. My mother reached for the big check on the table as if paper could change the past. Officer Reed took a photo of it first. The camera clicked like a small clock. I took in the room in the way my father had taught me when we fixed things at home. Look at parts, then look at the whole. The parts were simple. The flowers at the mantel. White roses that were not our kind of flowers. We liked daisies and cheap sunflowers, things that laughed. The candles tall and stiff like rules. The food rich and cold. The banner, gold and smooth and wrong. New beginnings. The whole was a plan, and I was the crack in it. Aunt Margaret stood close enough to hold my hand and not make a show of it. I've got you, she said under her breath. Ben hovered like a guard, and I saw a look pass between him and Officer Reed, a small nod that said, "We are here." James Carter asked if I had a safe place to stay tonight. With me, Aunt Margaret said at once. James said he would want to see the will in the morning and the letters from the bank. He spoke like a person tying knots that would hold. He told me later that the first consultation was free, but even then, I knew I would pay him every dollar he earned. Officer Reed walked through each room and took notes. He saw the empty champagne bottle on the breakfast bar with a handwritten label, "To a New Life." He took a photo of the cork, too, which made me like him more. He asked a woman from the marina, Melissa, in a blue dress, how she knew my mother. "I work the desk," she said. I saw her sign for the keys. She looked down at her shoes after she spoke, like someone who had just tripped the alarm by accident. My mother tried a different smile. She told Officer Reed we should keep this in the family for my sake, that the press in America was cruel, that it would hurt my future. The word future made me think of the blue door and the lime tree and my father's map in the hall, the pin stuck in the States where he had done work. I thought of a time he took me to a shop that sold old coins and let me pick one with a ship on it that cost $7. I kept it in a jar on my shelf with a note that said, "For voyages." A voyage had just happened, but not the kind he meant. More neighbors came in from the yard as the officers spoke to guests one by one. The party smell, roses and shrimp and warm sugar, faded into the clean scent of paper and ink from the forms being filled. A woman I did not know tried to bring me a plate of cheese. I told her thank you and set it down. My stomach felt like a closed fist. I drank more water. I pulled Ben's jacket close. At some point, I looked at the window and saw my reflection. I looked small and salt-streaked. A girl pulled from the sea and dropped into a room of glass and gold. But I also saw something quiet in my face. The quiet said, "I am here." The house heard me, I think. It creaked the way it does when the night air shifts and the wood lets out a sigh. This house had been my father's anchor. Now it was mine. Officer Reed finished a round of questions and came back to me. "We're going to sort this," he said, not as a promise to please me, but as a line he meant to follow. He asked if I had any clothes here I could change into. Aunt Margaret nodded and started up the stairs with me. As we climbed, I could still see the big check on the table below, the numbers bold and fake. For years, my mother had told me money was a kind of weather you had to get used to. Tonight, I learned that truth is its own weather. You stand in it and it clears the air. At the top of the stairs, I paused and looked back down at the living room full of stopped smiles, patient officers, and floating balloons. I felt the old floor steady under my feet. I thought of how far I had walked already, from open water to this blue door. It was a short walk in miles, but long in everything that matters. I took a breath, opened the hall closet, and reached for a towel. The party was not over, but the shape of it had changed. The tide had turned, and it was carrying me home. The days after the party felt long and loud. I moved into Aunt Margaret's small condo in Miami, a neat place with pale walls and a view of the bay. She made me toast and tea, and kept the kettle warm as if heat itself could keep me safe. I woke at night with salt in my throat and the sound of waves in my ears. In the morning, I wrote down what I remembered line by line, the way my father had taught me to fix a broken thing. Slow, careful, true. I missed our blue door and the lime tree. I missed my father's laugh in the hall. But I was breathing, and that was the first win. James Carter, the lawyer from New York City, sat with us at the small kitchen table and slid a folder toward me. He spoke in clear words. My father's will was simple: a trust for me until I turned 18, the house on Maple Street in my name, and a yearly allowance of $25,000 for my care. If anyone gets in the way, he said, we'll go to court. He did not charge us at first. He said we could talk about retainers later. He warned me the fight would be boring and hard. Stay steady, he said. Truth like steady. Officer Daniel Reed called each afternoon with news. He had the boat rental receipt, signed by my mother with a timestamp from that day. He had a statement from Luis at the marina, a quiet, tall man who said he watched us board and then watched my mother return alone. Melissa, who worked the desk, confirmed the rental. A neighbor at the pier, Carla, remembered my mother saying she wanted space when someone asked where I was. Officer Reed also pulled phone records and a bank notice that showed transfers beginning the morning of the party. $300,000 moved out of a family account. He did not tell me numbers to scare me. He told me so I would know the ground under my feet. We went to the first hearing in downtown Miami. The courthouse was wide and cold, with floors that echoed. The judge was a woman named Grace Turner. She listened more than she spoke. When I took the stand, I told my story the way I had written it down. The push, the drop, the green water, the dolphin fish like a lit coin, the walk home, the blue door. I did not add color. My mother said I had jumped to get attention, and her smile tried to be kind and failed. Judge Turner looked at the will, the bank letters, the rental slip, and the list of guests. She did not smile either. She asked my mother why the money had moved that morning. There was no good answer. Judge Turner placed the estate under court protection. She gave Aunt Margaret temporary care of me and ordered that the house remain in my name. She told the bank to freeze certain accounts and asked James Carter to file an inventory of assets. My mother's face did not change, but her hands did. She clasped them tight until the knuckles went white. When the hearing ended, the judge leaned forward and told me, "You did the hard part. Keep telling the truth." Outside, James Carter squeezed my hand once, firm and quick. "This is the right step," he said. "We keep going." Life became lists. A social worker named Elaine Brooks visited Aunt Margaret's condo and checked the window locks and the smoke alarm. She asked me about school and sleep and the ocean. I told her I was scared at night and fine in the day. She nodded and said fear was a sign my body still cared. Ben Walker came by on Saturdays with groceries and a smile that reached his eyes. He and Aunt Margaret drove by Maple Street and sent me a photo of the blue door to keep on my phone. At school, the counselor, Mr. Harris, let me sit in a quiet office for lunch until the noise felt normal again. I did my homework at the kitchen table and kept the kettle company. James hired a small firm to help, a forensic accountant named Peter Lowe, who wore brown shoes and saw stories and numbers. Peter traced the $300,000 transfer and found a new account open 2 days after my father's funeral. He said my mother had also tried to list one of my father's watches for sale. James moved fast and filed an order to stop any sales. He explained fees in simple lines. A retainer of $5,000 when we could manage it, then bills in blocks. I watched the totals and kept a notebook. I promised myself I would repay every dollar. Sometimes I wondered if I would ever feel light again. Then I would see the folder with my father's will, and the weight made sense. There were depositions next. My mother's lawyer, a sharp man named Victor Adams, tried to make me small with questions that doubled back on themselves. I stayed with the facts. When he asked the color of the boat rail, I said white. When he asked about the depth of the water, I said I did not know and would not guess. He asked about the dolphin fish and raised a brow. James put a hand on the table and said, "She will not be mocked for living." Victor looked down at his notes and moved on. Luis gave his statement. Melissa did too. The record grew, line by line, like a wall you could lean on. At a later hearing, Judge Turner set a date to review the trust and ordered my mother to surrender her passport. She also required weekly check-ins and said any attempt to sell property would be a direct violation of the court's order. The judge spoke evenly, the same way Officer Reed did. I liked that both of them left room in the air for facts to stand. My mother did not look at me when we passed in the hall. I looked at the floor and then at the map of America that hung near the clerk's office, with counties marked in small squares. I decided I would collect small squares of safety. This order, this rule, this witness, this day. Slowly, the noise around me turned into sense. I learned the routes to the courthouse, where the coffee was cheap, which elevator stuck, and which bench had a nick in the wood that felt like a notch you could press. I learned how to breathe before I spoke. I learned that truth is patient. It does not shout. It waits and holds. Each night, Aunt Margaret would say, "What did we win today?" And even if the answer was small, 1 page scanned, 1 form signed, we wrote it on a sticky note and stuck it to the fridge. By the end of the month, the door was a bright square of wins. One evening, after a long day with lawyers and forms, we stopped by Maple Street with Officer Reed's okay. The porch needed paint. The steps were still worn in the middle. I put my hand on the blue door and felt the coolness of it in my palm. "We're coming back," I told the house. It did not answer, but something in the frame seemed to stand a little straighter. I thought of my father's coin jar marked for voyages, and I knew this was a voyage too. Not across water, but through it. The fight was not loud. It was steady. And I was still here. I turned 18 in the same blue door house in Miami. We fixed the roof and sanded the floor. Aunt Margaret held the ladder while I painted my room a soft white. The air smelled like plaster and limes from the tree out front. I hung my father's map of America in the hall and pressed pins into New York, Chicago, Dallas, and Denver. Beside it, I nailed a small gold fish charm, my pledge to the dolphin fish that showed me the way. At night, I opened the windows and let the soft, slow sea wind move through the rooms. The court closed the case that spring. Judge Grace Turner read the order in a steady voice. My mother, Veronica, was found guilty of fraud and attempted to cause harm. She did not serve long, but she lost control of the estate. When she tried to run to Europe, the passport office flagged her. In the end, she rented a small apartment across town. I paid James Carter every cent, including the $8,000 invoice. I kept the trust simple, $50,000 for the porch and Aunt Margaret's bills, and $5,000 for a shelter for girls in Miami. I worked after school at a bookstore on Biscayne, saving $10 at a time and learning the calm of a clean ledger. Officer Daniel Reed stopped by once a year to ask about the lime tree. Ben waved from his yard and brought tools when the porch creaked. Lily brought coffee, and we sat on the steps at dusk, naming colors in the sky. Sometimes James called from New York City to check on the will and tell a joke I needed. The world steadied around me, one plain day after another, and I learned to like plain, clear, steady days.
People ask how I lived.
I tell them the truth in easy words. I fell into the ocean and did not give up. A dolphin fish lit my way. I walked back into a room of lies, and the lies fell away. Now the house is mine to keep in trust, my father's name beside mine on the deed. The numbers are honest and the door stays open. America is wide. When wind moves through the hall and shakes the map, I think of places I still hope to see, and of the girl on the shore who stood up and came home.